Have you ever found yourself wondering if the person who broke your heart ever stays awake thinking about the pain they caused? Have you asked yourself if they ever carry the same emotional weight you've been forced to carry? Or did they simply move on as though your love never meant anything? The truth is far more complex than it first appears. They often do feel something, but not in the way most people imagine. Behind the calm face they show the world and the silence they hide behind. There is often a quiet, emotional struggle they refuse to admit, even to themselves. Stay with me, because what comes next may completely change how you see their behavior. When someone you deeply loved suddenly becomes distant, acts as if you never existed, and walks away without looking back, it shakes your entire reality. You replay every conversation and every memory, searching for proof that the connection was real. You keep hoping there was some hidden sign that they truly cared. As the silence grows longer, it's easy to believe you meant nothing to them. But that belief is not the full story. People with avoidant patterns still experience deep emotions. Their pain doesn't disappear simply because they choose not to show it. The difference is in the way they deal with those feelings. While you may face your emotions directly, they often run from theirs. You search for understanding while they create more distance. It isn't because they are unable to care. Emotional closeness feels overwhelming to them. Pulling away becomes their way of protecting themselves. Their silence isn't strength or confidence, it's emotional suppression. And emotions that stay buried never truly disappear. They grow heavier over time, quietly following them into moments when they least expect it. Many people believe that if someone leaves and never comes back, it automatically means they never cared. With avoidant people, life is rarely that simple. Often, they cared much more deeply than they ever allowed themselves to admit. The relationship mattered because it reached places inside them they had spent years protecting. Instead of facing those feelings, they escaped from them. They didn't only disconnect from you, they disconnected from parts of themselves. Looking honestly at their emotions can feel overwhelming, so avoidance becomes the shield they depend on. You were never too much. Your love was never the real problem. Your presence was never a burden. In many ways, you became one of the few places where they actually felt emotionally safe, until fear became stronger than the comfort they experienced with you. And fear doesn't simply vanish after a relationship ends. Long after the conversations stop and you stop reaching out, memories still find their way back. A familiar song, an old picture, a street you once walked together. Small reminders can awaken emotions they believed were gone. On the outside, they may seem completely unaffected, but inside those moments still leave a mark. Remember this because it's important. Your value was never decided by another person's ability to remain emotionally available. Their silence was never proof that you weren't enough. Every emotion they buried, every regret they refused to face, every feeling they never spoke aloud points toward one simple truth: you mattered. Once you truly understand that, you stop measuring your worth by their actions and begin rebuilding your own peace. Keep watching, because the next insight explains why silence can sometimes hide the deepest emotions. You probably expected their pain to look like yours. Maybe you expected tears, heartfelt apologies, or an attempt to reconnect. Instead, all you received was silence. That silence convinced you they felt absolutely nothing. But people with avoidant behavior often hide pain instead of expressing it. When emotions become too intense, they shut down emotionally. Numbing themselves feels safer than experiencing everything at once. That doesn't mean the emotions disappear. It often means they feel too overwhelming to process. After hurting someone they genuinely cared about, they may appear detached, calm, or unusually logical. They repeat the story that they made the right decision because believing that protects them from facing guilt, shame, sadness, and longing. Sometimes they convince themselves you were too emotional or too demanding because that explanation feels easier than accepting the deeper truth. Yet underneath that carefully built story lives an inner conflict that never fully fades away. The longer they push those emotions down, the stronger they quietly become. People with avoidant patterns often carry guilt in complete silence. Instead of talking about it, they keep themselves busy, distract their minds, or withdraw even further from emotional connection. But hidden guilt has a way of returning. It appears during quiet nights, unexpected memories, lonely moments, or times when life finally slows down enough for their thoughts to catch up. Questions begin to surface that they can no longer easily ignore. What if they had stayed? What if they had found the courage to remain emotionally open? What if fear hadn't controlled their choices? Those questions can stay with them for years. One of the hardest truths to accept is that you may never receive the apology you've waited for. That isn't always because they don't care. For someone trapped in an avoidant cycle, saying "I'm sorry" requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels deeply threatening. Rather than risk exposing emotions they don't know how to handle, they continue pretending everything is fine while carrying feelings they refuse to name. They may build a life that looks normal from the outside, yet certain memories continue to return without warning. A familiar place, a meaningful date, or a quiet moment alone can bring everything rushing back. They may never tell anyone what they're feeling, but silence does not erase emotion. It simply hides it. Meanwhile, you have a different path available to you. Every day you spend healing is another step toward freedom. Every moment you stop chasing answers from someone unwilling to face themselves is another moment you give back to your own future. Your worth has never depended on whether another person was emotionally ready to stay. Their inability to face their own emotions was never proof that you were unlovable. It reflected the battle taking place inside them, not your value. So instead of waiting for words that may never come, choose to become the person who no longer needs them. The greatest closure often arrives when you stop searching for validation from the one who couldn't provide it. And once you truly embrace that truth, you'll realize something powerful. You were never difficult to love. You were simply offering your heart to someone who was still afraid of fully accepting their own. You didn't break them. They were already carrying emotional wounds they had never learned to face. Your love didn't fall short. It reached someone who simply wasn't ready to fully accept it. That doesn't reduce the value of your love. It reveals how deeply you were able to care. Your ability to love with honesty is still one of your greatest strengths. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to meet you at that same level. Their limits are not a reflection of your worth. You are not someone who is easily forgotten. You are someone whose presence leaves a lasting impression. Even if they never admit it out loud, your absence stays with them. Many continue living behind emotional numbness, convincing themselves that everything is perfectly fine. But hidden shame has a way of finding the surface. Their body remembers the tension when your name unexpectedly crosses their mind. Their heart remembers the quiet emptiness that appears during peaceful moments. Deep inside, they know they walked away from someone who truly understood them. That realization doesn't simply disappear. Stay with me, because the next part explains why this matters more than most people realize. There is an important difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame quietly whispers, "There is something wrong with me." Many people with avoidant patterns carried that belief long before you entered their life. Your love didn't create their fear. It exposed it. Your closeness brought hidden wounds into the light after years of being buried. Instead of facing those wounds, they escaped. Not because your love lacked value, but because it reached places inside them they had never learned how to heal. If they ever accepted what truly happened, they would have to face parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. That is why avoidance is never real peace. It is emotional confinement disguised as protection. When someone genuine enters their life, someone dependable, caring, and emotionally present, it shines a light on everything they have worked so hard to keep hidden. Instead of leaning into that connection, they build emotional walls and convince themselves those walls are a sign of strength. They disappear and call it clarity. They create distance and call it independence. Yet deep inside, something continues to ache. A quiet voice keeps reminding them they walked away from something real. That feeling doesn't vanish once you're gone. It follows them through lonely nights, forced laughter, busy schedules, and the quiet moments when life finally slows down. But none of that belongs to you anymore. You cannot rescue someone who refuses to face themselves. You cannot convince someone of your value when they secretly believe they are unworthy of love. Their healing is their responsibility. Your healing belongs to you. Stop carrying blame that was never yours to hold. Stop asking yourself whether you loved too deeply or expected too much. You simply loved honestly. Real love often feels frightening to people who have never experienced emotional safety. Their distance was never proof that you failed. It reflected their fear, not your value. You didn't lose yourself through this experience. You outgrew someone who wasn't emotionally ready to meet you where you stood. That is what healing looks like. That is how peace slowly returns. Keep listening, because what comes next may completely change the way you see their actions after the relationship ended. They may act as though the relationship meant very little. They may convince themselves that leaving was easy, but in many cases that is simply another layer of emotional protection. Admitting what they lost would force them to question the identity they built around staying emotionally in control. Ironically, the greater your impact, the more they try to minimize it. That is one of the painful contradictions of avoidant behavior. The stronger the emotions become, the greater the distance they create. When they describe you as too emotional or too intense, they are often describing the discomfort your closeness awakened inside them. They needed space, not because your love was wrong, but because they were unprepared for its depth. When real love reaches an unhealed heart, fear often becomes louder than connection. They tell themselves they are happier alone because emotional distance feels safer than emotional closeness. Yet your presence continues living quietly inside their memory. They don't easily forget the person who accepted them, while also exposing everything they tried to hide. That combination of comfort and vulnerability becomes something they carry long after the relationship has ended. You were never asking for anything unreasonable. You were simply asking someone who wasn't emotionally available to meet you halfway. You brought warmth into places inside them that had been cold for years. Instead of accepting that warmth, they stepped away. Don't mistake that withdrawal for emotional strength. They are not moving ahead while you are left behind. They are standing still, believing isolation will keep them safe. You, however, chose a different path. You faced your pain. You allowed yourself to grieve. You gave yourself permission to grow and heal. That is real strength. Even if they rarely admit it, they remember. They remember your kindness, your patience, the way you looked at them, the safety you offered, and how you made them feel understood after years of emotional distance. Those memories never truly disappear. They simply push them beneath endless distractions, busy routines, and emotional avoidance. But buried does not mean erased. Avoidance hides emotions. It never removes them. Many believe emotional detachment gives them control, but control built on emotional suppression is always temporary. Eventually, memories return. Quiet moments become louder. Familiar places trigger forgotten feelings. A simple song, an unexpected conversation, or an ordinary evening can bring everything rushing back without warning. They may continue pretending they are unaffected, yet deep inside they still carry unanswered questions they don't know how to face. Meanwhile, your life no longer has to be controlled by what they choose to acknowledge or ignore. Your future is no longer tied to their emotional readiness. Every step you take toward healing is proof that your strength was never dependent on someone else's ability to love you correctly. Your peace begins the moment you stop waiting for validation from the person who could never fully offer it. The greatest victory isn't making them realize what they lost. It's reaching a place where your happiness no longer depends on whether they ever do. And when that day arrives, you'll finally understand one powerful truth. You were never too much. You simply offered genuine love to someone who had not yet learned how to receive it. Over time, your absence begins speaking more loudly than your presence ever did. The illusion they once depended on slowly starts to fall apart. What stays with them usually isn't the arguments or even the breakup itself. It's the quiet realization that someone truly loved them, accepted who they really were, and they still allowed fear to make the final decision. That realization carries a weight they never expected to feel. Eventually, many begin to understand that what they lost was never ordinary. They slowly recognize the relationship didn't end because you were missing something. It ended because fear became stronger than connection. Silence took the place of honesty, and emotional safety somehow felt more frightening than being alone. While they continue struggling with those truths, you've already started moving forward. You faced the emotions they kept avoiding, and that process changed you. You didn't simply survive what happened. You became stronger because you chose to face it. Stay with me, because this next truth changes everything. Whether they ever come back is no longer the most important part of the story. The real victory was never getting them back. The real victory is finding your own peace. Ironically, your silence often reaches them more deeply than your words ever could. Many people with avoidant patterns expect to be chased. They believe you'll continue explaining yourself, continue waiting, continue reaching out. But when that pursuit finally stops, they're left alone with emotions they can no longer outrun. Your absence forces them to experience the consequences of choices they spent so long avoiding. They don't always miss you in obvious ways. They may never send late-night messages or openly admit they regret losing you. Instead, memories appear without warning. A familiar scent, a favorite song, a quiet afternoon, a place you once visited together. Those simple moments can carry unexpected emotional weight, even if they never admit it to anyone. Pride may stop them from reaching out, but memory never asks permission. That is where your strength becomes impossible to ignore. Not through revenge, not through proving a point, but through genuine peace. You stopped chasing someone who was committed to running away. You never lost your value when they left. They lost access to someone who truly cared for them. Healing teaches you something powerful. Not everyone has the emotional ability to receive the love you freely offered. They may never tell you they miss you. They may never admit how deeply you mattered. But your healing no longer depends on hearing those words. Your confidence now comes from choosing yourself every single day. Your silence isn't anger, it is self-respect. Your life no longer revolves around proving your worth to someone who couldn't recognize it. You became unforgettable, not because they walked away, but because you refused to stay trapped inside the pain they left behind. They notice the difference. They see your peace. They see your confidence. They see the way your light no longer bends, just to earn someone's approval. Keep watching, because the next part reveals why your growth becomes something they cannot ignore. Sometimes they return without saying a single word. They watch quietly from a distance because seeing your growth reminds them of the place where they remain emotionally stuck. Watching someone heal from the pain they caused becomes its own silent burden. They begin wondering if you've truly moved on. They wonder if you still think about them or if they've become nothing more than one chapter in your story. Those questions remain because somewhere inside, they know they could have made different choices. Let that realization stay with them. It isn't revenge, it is accountability. When someone repeatedly chooses fear instead of love and distance instead of honesty, they eventually have to live with the results of those decisions. They no longer have unlimited access to your time, your patience, your kindness, or your heart. Your healing was never meant to prove anything to them. It became a promise you finally made to yourself. You no longer shrink to fit another person's emotional limits. You no longer owe endless explanations, repeated chances, or years of waiting. Your peace now speaks louder than pleading ever could. Some mornings they wake with a heaviness they can't fully explain. They may not even have words for it. Yet beneath all the distractions, one truth quietly remains. They remember what they had. They remember what they feared. They remember what they lost. Meanwhile, you've discovered something far more valuable than closure from another person. You've discovered freedom inside yourself. What they carry isn't always a sharp pain. It's quieter than that. Steady. Lasting. Impossible to completely ignore. What they miss isn't only your presence. They miss the peace you brought into their life. They miss your patience, your calm, and the emotional safety they experienced when they were with you. Those things are gone now, leaving behind an empty space they never expected to notice. They believed walking away would make life easier. Instead, the distance they asked for slowly became loneliness. They assumed you would always return. Instead, your silence became proof of your strength. They expected the same cycle to continue, but this time you chose differently. You are no longer there to absorb their confusion or calm the emotional storms they refuse to face. That is when the full weight of their choices begins to settle in. They notice it during moments that should feel joyful, but somehow don't. Laughter feels incomplete. New connections never truly replace what was lost. They rarely admit it aloud, yet deep inside, they recognize that nothing completely fills the space you left behind. Vulnerability still feels dangerous to them. Even so, one quiet question continues to return. What if? At the center of that question is your absence. The difference now is that you are no longer waiting for an answer. Instead of searching for closure from someone who couldn't give it, you turned inward. You discovered that real closure doesn't come from receiving an apology. It comes from protecting your heart, honoring your value, and choosing your own peace every single day. Let them keep their silence if they choose. Let them carry the consequences of what they couldn't face. You don't need to explain your healing or justify the person you've become. You were enough then, and you are enough now. Your peace no longer depends on whether they regret losing you. Every step away from confusion brings you closer to becoming the strongest version of yourself. That is a strength they may eventually recognize, but it is no longer something they can reclaim through you. They may wish they had one more chance, but healing quietly closes doors that pain once kept open. Not because of anger or resentment, but because you've grown beyond needing their approval. You've discovered that peace isn't found in being chosen by someone else. It's found in choosing yourself every single day. They believed ignoring their emotional wounds would somehow make them disappear. Instead, those wounds stayed hidden beneath the surface, becoming heavier with time. Eventually, many begin to understand that you were never just another relationship. You reflected parts of themselves they had spent years avoiding. You showed them both their ability to love and the fears hidden beneath that love. That reflection scared them. Instead of facing it, they pushed it away. Now they're left trying to live around the pieces of what they broke. On the outside, they may appear perfectly fine. They stay busy, keep themselves distracted, and continue acting as though nothing ever happened. But quiet moments are much harder to escape. When the noise fades, the emptiness quietly returns. No distraction completely fills that space because what they lost wasn't only a relationship, they lost the rare feeling of being accepted, understood, and emotionally safe. Stay with me, because the next part reveals why your silence became more powerful than anything you could have said. Meanwhile, you've stopped searching for clarity from someone still living in emotional confusion. You've stopped asking someone to understand what they were never prepared to hear. That became the turning point in your story. You stopped making yourself smaller just to fit inside another person's emotional limits. You loved honestly, and now you're learning how to let go without bitterness. While they continue carrying memories they refuse to examine, you carry lessons that helped you become stronger. You move forward, not because the relationship meant nothing, but because you finally remembered that your life matters too. There are moments when they think about reaching out. They imagine sending a message, explaining everything, maybe even offering the apology you once hoped to hear. Then fear steps in once again. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of admitting they lost something they may never find again. That hesitation becomes its own prison. They remain behind walls built from pride while you continue building a life filled with peace. The distance between the person you used to be and the person you're becoming becomes impossible for them to ignore. Pain didn't make you colder, it made you wiser. They never expected you to truly move forward because they believed your kindness would always be waiting for them. But healing taught you that love without respect eventually becomes self-abandonment. The emotional energy they once depended on is no longer available. Not because you became bitter, but because you finally chose yourself. People with avoidant patterns often long for emotional safety while struggling to create it. When they finally experience genuine closeness, they question it, test it, doubt it, push it away, and later grieve it quietly. They desire intimacy while fearing it at the same time. They want love, but secretly wonder if they deserve it. That inner conflict belongs to them, not to you. You were never their enemy. You simply reflected truths they weren't ready to accept. Their fear was never yours to heal. Their silence was never your responsibility to fix. Keep watching, because this next realization changes everything about how you see your own healing.